In the 1960s, many Latinos living on the West Coast were farm workers. Many farm owners exploited these workers by routinely ignoring state laws regarding working standards. In 1962, led by the dynamic Cesar Chavez, the National Farm Workers Association, NFWA, was formed to try and improve working conditions. Like Dr. King, Chavez employed nonviolent tactics to achieve his goals. In 1965, the NFWA, later to become the United Farm Workers, began a strike against grape growers in California. Chavez and the NFWA also organized a successful consumer boycott of grapes that were not picked by unionized labor. By 1970, most grape growers had agreed to contracts with the farm workers. Later, California Governor Jerry Brown signed a bill, the 1975 Agricultural Labor Relations Act, that established collective bargaining laws for farm workers. While the battle for civil rights has been fought by many groups of people, it is ironic that those native to America have been consistently denied opportunity here. In 1968, inspired by militant black groups, young Native Americans formed the American Indian Movement, or AIM, which called for political action and cultural pride. In 1969, members of AIM seized Alcatraz Island, an unoccupied former federal penitentiary in San Francisco Bay, holding it for 19 months to publicize the plight of Native Americans. In an effort to call attention to what they considered centuries of betrayal and deceit, AIM led the Trail of Broken Treaties March on Washington in 1972. They demanded proper health care, housing, employment, economic development, and education for all Indian people. In 1973, armed members of AIM and other Native Americans occupied the town of Wounded Knee on the Pine Ridge Reservation of South Dakota, site of an infamous massacre of Indians by federal troops in 1890. The intent was to publicize the terrible conditions in which the Sioux people lived. But events got out of control when the armed protesters clashed with FBI agents during the 71-day siege, and 2 AIM members were killed. The militant pressure did result in some minor change. The government returned 48,000 acres of sacred lands to the Taos Pueblo of New Mexico. The Nixon administration targeted minority aid programs for Native Americans living in cities, and Congress added money in the Indian Education Act of 1972. Asian Americans also pushed for federal help in overcoming problems related to inadequate health care and overcoming language barriers, as well as economic reforms, equal pay for equal work. When Hawaii became a state in 1959, Asian Americans were ensured greater political representation in the U.S. Congress. Since the late 40s, many Japanese Americans had sought justice for being forced by the U.S. government to live in internment camps during World War II. Although the government paid some monies under the Japanese American Evacuation Claims Act of 1948, it was not until 1988 that the United States government formally apologized and provided more substantial payments as compensation to the displaced Japanese Americans. Issues of equality were not limited to race and ethnicity. The movement for civil rights also had a major impact on women. Women joined the industrial workforce in great numbers during World War II, enjoying a new measure of economic independence and job satisfaction. But many left the workforce at the war's end as returning soldiers reclaimed their factory jobs. In 1963, Betty Friedan's book, The Feminine Mystique, pointed out the plight of the so-called housewife, verbalizing the dissatisfaction of many women. Passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, however, would help change that. Title VII of that law prohibits employment discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. By forbidding discrimination by gender, Title VII would become one of the cornerstones of the women's movement. In 1966, Friedan and 27 other women founded NOW, the National Organization for Women, to help achieve their goals. NOW's aim was to take action, to bring about equality for all women. Equal job opportunities, along with equal pay, were at the top of their list. NOW pointed out that for every dollar a man made, a woman made 59 cents for the same job. NOW also focused on the value of women's work inside the home. They popularized the slogan, "Every mother is a working mother." Using Title VII as leverage, women began entering the labor force in swelling numbers at nearly every level of employment. Women also began earning college degrees in rapidly increasing numbers.
Nowadays, the entering classes of law school classes are about 50% women. And in medical schools, the entering classes at least, are 30 to 40% women. This is a big change from the 1960s in terms of the opportunities available to women.
NOW and other women's groups also work to secure reproductive freedom by calling for the repeal of existing anti-abortion laws. In 1973, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that such laws were unconstitutional in Roe v. Wade. This landmark decision severely limited state abortion laws and effectively legalized abortion in the U.S. Many women participated in a campaign for an equal rights amendment to the Constitution, which stated that equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of sex. The ERA made it through Congress, but did not get the required approval from 3/4 of the state legislatures to become an amendment. Sex discrimination was not only a women's issue. Homosexuals protested discrimination based on sexual orientation, demanding the same legal protections as heterosexuals. Although many activists have been effective in the fight to end discriminatory practices, gay rights remain a divisive social and political issue. Like other groups, rights for the disabled have often been overlooked. Even today, people with disabilities continue to press for equal opportunities to participate fully in American society. The 1990 Americans with Disabilities Act represented the single most sweeping civil rights legislation since the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The bill banned discrimination in the hiring, promoting, and firing of persons with disabilities. In the space of 40 years, the civil rights movement made important gains. Legal segregation came to an end. Discriminatory practices in housing and the workplace were outlawed, and the concept of equal rights began to expand beyond groups defined by race. In 1965, the federal government, in an attempt to make up for past discrimination, introduced affirmative action. The policy encouraged the inclusion of minorities in hiring, college admissions, and the awarding of government contracts. Affirmative action helped diversify jobs, unions, police and fire departments, and college campuses across the country. Nevertheless, many groups continue to strive for equality in America.
It's fashionable to say, well, the more things change, the more they stay the same, and we really haven't made as much progress as we needed to make. Absolutely right. This country is not yet equal, but an enormous change has occurred.
The people are diverse, but the goal is the same, to create one out of many, one body of individuals with equal protection under the law. As a result of the civil rights movements during the latter half of the 20th century, America has moved closer to the pledge of one nation with liberty and justice for all.